This is Rakesh Patel, and you're listening to the EB-5 Fix. Welcome to the first episode of the EB-5 Fix podcast. My name is Rakesh Patel with the Patel Law Group. I'm the managing partner. Been working in EB-5 for a better part of 7 years, representing investors all over the world, and specifically India. I'm joined here by my colleague, friend, and the best EB-5 deal side attorney that I know, Shae Armstrong with Bradley. Shae, welcome to the show, and looking forward to doing this with you. Tell the listeners what this EB-5 Fix podcast is going to be all about.
Yeah, thanks, Rakesh. I'm excited. So I'm project finance side. That's securities, debt, equity, and then Rakesh, of course, is the EB-5 immigration specialist. And so we work together on numerous deals over many years. But yeah, I'm excited for this podcast, the EB-5 Fix, because I think we're going to attack EB-5 from a bunch of different angles. From simply the real estate finance, project finance side, so that developers can tune in and listen and learn something. And then also from your side, the investor side.
Yeah, well, I think we're going to have a lot of guests that join us over the several weeks and months that we do this. Everybody from regional centers to developers that have had success to investors that have had success. Do you is there a particular subject area you think that will interest listeners the most?
I'm excited too. We have a kind of a rock star lineup of our guests, and anything from like legislative pathfinders to the early days of EB-5 reform, to economists, regional center representatives, actual real people who obtained their green card through EB-5, which is going to be cool. My favorite, I think, we were talking about it this morning. The whole fund administration thing's really new. And so I think bringing on the specialists who do this every day and providing that transparency to the program, that's going to be really interesting. Yeah,
I look forward to just the idea of having a place where we can learn more from our listeners. We can learn more from the guests that we have, but then we can also give our listeners the real truth behind EB-5. That's why it's called EB-5 Fix. We're going to get you all the information that you possibly could need. It's an ever-changing landscape in EB-5. I mean, I think it's changed on us since we've been doing it, 50, 60 times on how things are administered, both on the deal side and on the investor side. So I think this is going to be a great opportunity for us to learn, for our listeners to learn. But we're going to give you guys the truth. We're going to give you guys stories. We're going to have fun on this podcast. And we're going to make sure that we're listening to the listeners and providing the best information that we can possibly provide.
Yeah, we're going to provide the good, bad, and ugly, and the beautiful.
Right, and in this first episode, we've actually named Back to the Future, and there's a reason for that. Yeah. Do you want to expound on that a little bit?
Well, I think it's kind of another perfect storm in EB-5, and we lived this in the 2009 to 2011 when we saw the perfect storm of somewhat of a credit freeze in the U.S. due to a downturn in the market and the Great Recession, and then project sponsors looking for alternative sources of more affordable financing. And at the same time, you saw the emergence of wealth in China with appreciation of property values, and it just created a perfect storm in EB-5. Now we fast forward to where we are now. We have a new EB-5 law. We have interest rates are up. The world's educated about EB-5, especially our newer countries such as India. And so it's almost like we're reliving it with a couple different, with the fact pattern being a little different now.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see this because when we started, or at least I started in EB-5, we were looking at what markets were underserved, and one of the markets we identified was India.
Yep.
And you look at why the market's hot all of a sudden. About 6-8 months ago, I started getting way more phone calls than I'd gotten in the last 2 or 3 years on EB-5. And you start looking around and saying, well, what's causing this? Well, there's a lot of global reasons why money wants to flow to the U.S., which, we can expound on episodes in the future. But, one of the things that we're seeing from the developer side is these interest rates, as soon as they rose, we're looking for capital that's a little bit more affordable. And that's where the foreign investors come in. And then you mix that with the idea of the investments being either $800,000 or $1,050,000. That $800,000 number isn't as bad as what we saw earlier in the middle side of the changes on EB-5. Right. So this has actually been a perfect storm, like you said, of where EB-5 is headed. We're seeing more interest now than we've ever seen from investors. We're taking calls daily from investors, and I'm sure you're getting calls from developers on a constant basis. And so we're looking forward to reattacking this EB-5 issue, but doing it with the knowledge and experience and expertise that we've gained over the last 7, 8, 9 years. Go ahead.
Yeah, just to add to that, Rakesh, I think also as lenders get more conservative, more traditional lenders get more conservative, they're requiring additional equity to be put into projects. So maybe before you're leveraging your real estate development deal at 75%, maybe that's going to go down to 65%.
Right.
Where's that extra equity going to come from?
Right.
That's affordable. Well, EB-5 serves that role.
Yeah, it's kind of your bridge, whether it be bridge debt or bridge equity or whatever it may be. And the great part about what Shae and I do is that we both understand each other's roles. While I work with the EB-5 investor and we're looking at sourcing the funds and making sure they qualify, I'm also very well aware of what Shae does on the debt side and the equity side, just having an understanding in business and background. And so we can make sure that our clients are well informed before they're spending a lot of money, jumping into EB-5, because it's a long process. As I tell all of our clients, it's a marathon, not a race. And EB-5, unfortunately, USCIS has made it a marathon, sometimes a never-ending marathon. And so we're always preparing our clients and making sure that they know what's going on. And so, Shae, why don't you tell me some updates on the new laws on increases in prices and integrity measures?
Yeah, so most of the EB-5 industry knows this, but it's important. Let's do a macro overview on this first one. And so the investment minimum price went from $500,000 to $800,000, and a targeted employment area,
right?
A rural area, outside a metropolitan statistical area, less than 20,000 people is a rural, or infrastructure is kind of a new twist to the whole,
right.
the whole program.
That's a new part,
right? And I think we all agree it's probably a good thing, right?
It is, and it's well needed.
And so, one thing, the targeted employment areas now, before you could, I guess we can use this word that those days are over, but essentially some of these maps were gerrymandered to create targeted employment areas. But now you can use census tracts that are contiguous and adjacent to your project site. So there is some flexibility, but it is a more conservative approach.
So you're telling me downtown Manhattan or Highland Park, Texas may not qualify as a TEA?
Yeah, and even Beverly Hills, parts of Beverly Hills.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Man.
It's amazing how the system was being used before all of these measures took place.
Yeah, I'm shorting Beverly Hills stock right now, yeah. But yeah, so you had the rural, the target employment area, and then the outside of target employment area, which is now adjudicated by USCIS and not the economist.
Right.
If you don't qualify for one of the exemptions at the lower level, it's now 1.05 million.
Right.
Yeah.
And that 1.05 million, and for everybody listening in, it's only 250,000. Is that right? 250,000 more than your TEA investment.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to do the math.
Yeah, I had to do the math as well. But
Yeah,
it's a little bit of difference. I mean, before it was 500,000 and $1 million, and then it had a bigger change than that. It went up to 1.8 million, which was not sustainable, essentially killed the EB-5 program. And now we're back to probably a pretty good level that allows investors that are in foreign countries to invest. So I actually like the numbers, and I think that what I'm seeing is from investors is that it's a very viable number.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about our experiences, because we've had a lot of EB-5 experiences together in foreign countries. But I want you to first talk about your first EB-5 experience and kind of give us a timeline of when it was actually when that experience was.
So this is I got involved in EB-5 in about 2008 when it really started to reemerge.
Right.
It's been around since 1990, but like we said, the perfect storm happened. In 2008, it got really popular. And so this is probably in 2011. If I shave, I look like I'm 9 years old, and I was in my early 30s. So I was clean shaven, and on a Thursday, I had to be in Tulsa for a wedding on Monday. But on that Thursday, it was Memorial Day weekend. So it was that Wednesday, maybe it was Wednesday. I was working in-house. The CEO said, "Shae, we need you on a flight to Hong Kong because there's a Chinese gambling boat leaving into the South China Sea, and there's going to be all these EB-5 finders or agents that can procure a bunch of EB-5 capital that can put it into our projects."
Okay.
So at the time, it's a lot easier to say to your wife when you don't have kids. We were newlyweds, and sure, why not? Grab a backpack, throw some junk into it, and head off. And so arrive on Thursday. On Friday, I'm in a Chinese gambling boat, sick as a dog, from tossing and turning in the waves. And then
it wasn't from gambling.
Yeah, so the next day I get on a flight. Long story short, I arrived. There were no direct flights at that time from China, right? So you had to go to Chicago or Vancouver, or Detroit, right, or LA, and I'm just completely delirious. And I had to get home, breakfast with the kids. And I was going to drive to Tulsa, 4 hours away for my friend's wedding. And so as in those days, you had to clear customs, and you actually had to have the physical interface with an individual. This is before the days of, what do you call it? The
pre-check, global entry, all that kind of stuff.
Global entry, all that new stuff. There's like 5 of them now. And the guy looked at me, and I was like probably wearing a Beastie Boys shirt with cargo shorts and clean shaven. And he said, "You went to China for 72 hours, and then you were in the South China Sea." And he was pretty convinced that I was a mule for some product going in some direction or the other. But I clearly said, "Hey," immediately said, "Hey, I'm an EB-5 specialist." And then he looked at me, his eyes got big, and he said, "Those are the biggest files I've ever seen in my life." Yeah. The customs official. So you have those kind of weird stories where you're coming and going. And, when we started, it was definitely a young man's and woman's game, because you're coming and going, and you're spending a lot of time in coach. I couldn't do that anymore. My back would be crumpled.
Yeah, it would definitely be a lot more painful than what we were doing. My first experience, EB-5, I think this was 2015, 2016. I can't remember, maybe late 2015, early 2016. As far as going overseas, was my partner and I, Rakesh Patel. We decided, hey, we're gonna advertise EB-5 in India, and we're gonna be the first ones to do it. In a wide place in Gujarat, which is where our heritage, our foundation is from. So he and I planned these big meetings in Gujarat. We have all these flyers ready to go. We've talked to some people there. We're like some chartered accountants and some finders, and we're like, hey, we're going to do a seminar. We're going to let everybody know how much we know about EB-5, and can't wait to meet hundreds of people that are interested in EB-5. So we fly out. We tell our wives, same thing. Where you didn't have kids, I did have kids, and she was like, my wife looked at me, he goes, "You're going for 5 days to India and you're coming back?" And I said, "That's the plan." So we'll see how it works out. So we get to India, we're excited, we've got this room, it's set up, catered food, we probably have about 100 chairs, and we got some standing room only. It's supposed to start like at 1 p.m. Indian Standard Time. We figured 2 p.m. And we get the event started. We're waiting. We got people working registration for us, and I think about 4 people showed up. And those 4 people, they were really interested. I don't think anybody ever hired us. So then, fast forward like the next day, we have another seminar in a different location, and about 8 people showed up. And we were so excited because we doubled the number of people that showed up. And what we learned from that is the persistence that it was going to take in the EB-5 world to really understand what the investors and developers were looking for. We thought we could come in with a bunch of knowledge and tell everybody how smart we were. And in reality, what we needed to be doing is just listening. And I think from there, you and I have shared, and we'll share further episodes, the adventures, I think, of Rakesh and Shae in EB-5 world and what we've done in traveling India. But we've had a lot of success working with clients, working with investors, and met a bunch of great people along these last 6-7 years.
So I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I am.
Sure.
Here's a little curveball. And we won't name project sponsors, locations, name of projects. We met on very interesting, our first deal was very interesting, to say the least.
Yeah.
And this is how we met.
Yeah.
And it involved a dead deal, potential motorcycle gang shootout in front of a potential restaurant, maybe?
EB-5, a potential EB-5 investment for investors. Yeah, that was an amazing day experience. So real quick, Shae, I was doing my first EB-5 deal somebody introduced me to. And like Shae said, we won't name names, but we were excited about it. We thought we're going to get some Chinese investors in. I had not met Shae in person yet, but I'd met him on the phone. And Shae just happened to be in China for this particular project in the morning that he was supposed to meet with investors. The deal went sideways in the U.S. from all the media coverage you could possibly want. And Shae, how did you handle that in China?
Well, I said, well, it's 10 a.m. We have at least an hour and a half to happy hour. What are we doing here? We don't have a project to sell. And the controversy in the U.S. involving this project involved gun violence, which is a very serious issue here. But in China, they definitely, that makes the media coverage in China because they don't have those issues in China. And so that just simply killed our deal. And I enjoyed my 36 hours in China and got in the next flight home.
And I had never met Shae. And then after that, I think we said, we emailed each other and said, I think I asked you, but what was that experience like? What in the hell did you do there? And then from there, Shae and I decided, we could probably, help each other out by working both deal side and investor side. And from there formed what we now have been worked on, dozens of projects together and hundreds of investors together. So EB-5 is an interesting world. You never know who you're going to meet. You don't know the possibilities are out there. And that's part of the reason why we're doing this, because we want investors and developers to know that, hey, you could be the next one and you don't even know it yet. Yeah. But it's one of those things where when we started this podcast and we had this idea, we were researching EB-5 podcast, we were researching, what's out there, and all we were hearing was folks, whether it be attorneys or whether it be developers or whether it be deal side or immigration attorneys, all they were talking about is just the rules. Yep. And we're going to do that. We're going to do a lot of that, but we're not going to do it just by ourselves. We're going to bring the people in that make the rules. We're going to bring the people in that adjudicate the rules, and we're going to bring the people in that have to play by the rules. And that's going to be fun. And
I think we've both been expert witnesses in litigation cases. Hey, why did EB-5 deals go bad? I think it's important to be transparent and honest about this program like any other program.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of fraud in EB-5.
Yep.
Thankfully, neither one of us have ever been involved in any cases that existed. Knock on wood, that's right. But we have seen a lot of fraud in EB-5, which is why we've had to have all these measures. Yep. Shae, what do you expect to see in the next year or two in EB-5 as far as, just tell me, what do you expect to see?
Yeah, so I just got back from a great conference. It was called AFIRE in DC. It's the Association for Foreign Investment in Real Estate. I highly recommend it. It was just great content. And there's a prestigious economist who gave a presentation, and he said two things really. The Fed is usually overreacts during downturns and then is always late to the party. So he says, despite the inflationary rate for the past 3 months being annualized at essentially 0%, we'll probably see an increase in interest rates in the next 6 months to a year.
Right.
Well, that's just going to strengthen and embolden the EB-5 program, and so I think you're going to see another wave that we saw in 2017, 2016, 2011, with a focus on the Indian markets. I think Bangladesh, Nepal. I think you're going to see, which we'll talk about with the three buckets here shortly. I think you're going to see an opportunity for China and Vietnam to come back on the radar for EB-5. But I'm expecting a 24-month at the least run on EB-5.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree with that. I mean, we're seeing it just talking to investors on a daily basis. I've got a call right after this. EB-5 is one of those interesting cases where it's investors that want to come from overseas to the U.S., but there's most of the cases we see are either H-1Bs or L-1s that are in the U.S. or children that are students of investors overseas. And I think you're just going to see a lot more of that. I think what people are doing is noticing that, okay, we can have the money here, whether it be gifted or a proper type of loan. And I think the information over the last 5, 6, 7 years, as has traveled so fast that EB-5 is not a scary subject anymore. It's not foreign to most investors. People have a good knowledge of it. I mean, when we were going to India, we're seeing EB-5 billboards. We would do EB-5 seminars in Ahmedabad, and there's 3 others going on. So it's not anything that's new. What I think now is people are more willing to take action. They're well educated about it. And I think these next 2 or 3 years, I think it's really important for investors to get all the information they possibly can, at least from my perspective, and make sure they qualify.
Yeah.
And we can go over qualification once again in future episodes, but really right now just asking the right questions is a really big deal in listening to these investors, because they have a lot of knowledge, more than they did 7, 8, 10, 12 years ago for sure.
Yeah.
So talk about, you just mentioned the 3 buckets of TEA rules. Why don't you talk a little bit about how what's the changes now?
Yeah, so I was surprised for you too, Rakesh.
Uh-oh.
Our director of programming, David, over here, when I get excited, I start banging stuff and my feet start tapping like Tom Arnold. So he's like, stop tapping your feet. But so I'll try to be calm here. Okay, so what date do you see on this memo?
Let's see. What do you have here? August 27, 2015.
Who's it from?
It's from Shae Armstrong and Paul Knitra to Kathy Newble and Francis Cisna.
So Kathy Newble-Kovarik was what is it? I'm going to mess this terminology up.
It's real. We're not making this up.
The chief legal counsel for the Judiciary Committee at the time, where Grassley was really pushing for reforms to the EB-5 program. And there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of rural versus urban arguments. And then Francis Cisna later became Kathy became the chief counsel at USCIS, and Francis Cisna was appointed by Trump and became the director of USCIS. And the group I was representing was the More American Job Alliance. And now go to page 2, Rakesh.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
See here.
Okay. And at the bottom, see, I'm tapping again, David. At the bottom, you're going to see what do you see?
You have a bucket. Are you talking about the bucket 1 or bucket 1?
This is our proposal to Grassley's reforms.
You've got a minimum investment of $800,000.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty impressive. And this was in August of 2015.
Yeah. The maximum investment we had is 1.25, so we did better than that.
You were just off.
I mean, awful.
What were you doing?
I know.
So you're telling me that in 2015 you had a proposal, and you had already kind of outlined why this proposal needed to be the way it is.
So after $250,000 and 6 years, we got a line into the bill or into the new law.
That's impressive.
Okay.
That's the smartest thing I've ever heard you do.
Because we wanted the rural bucket. So thank you. Thank you. So the idea was to level the playing field, so not all EB-5 monies. Historically, EB-5 monies have gone into gateway cities.
Right.
And so we really wanted to level the playing field. And if you're Senator Grassley, the chairman at the time of the Judiciary Committee, U.S. Judiciary Committee, and you represent Kansas, was that Kansas? No, Iowa. Excuse me. Sorry. Yeah. Iowa, you weren't getting any EB-5 monies at that time. Or you're Senator Leahy, who was the minority leader, who was aligned with Grassley, and you represent, I believe, Vermont. Mm-hmm. Other than that one ski resort we won't talk about.
Yeah.
You were not getting much EB-5. And so now under the new laws, you have a 20% bucket or carve out for rural projects.
Allocation, essentially.
Right, a priority processing.
Priority, right.
If that's the right word, immigration-wise.
Right.
2% for infrastructure, and then 2% for high unemployment areas. Okay. And what's interesting, if I read my notes correctly, because I was looking at this morning. Okay, number 1, the unused reserves are carried over to the next year.
Yeah, so they have an unused reserve category now. So if you look it up online, there's actually...
Really?
Yeah, it'll tell you, is it current? Is it not current? Like a good into the details of immigration. But there is a true unreserved category now. So there's unreserved and reserved. So they have different priority dates, which is interesting, which is actually probably good. It gives us more information as to how this is going to move forward.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Sorry about that.
And I was also reading by a bunch of experts were aligned on this, that... Okay, so the unused reserve carry may be applied to post-enactment investors. So this could basically bring China and Vietnam back on the map. So would this mean that you would have if this was carried out and it was only applied to post-enactment investors,
yes,
you could have Chinese jumping their own Chinese,
which is interesting. It's one of those things that I don't know that USCIS has completely thought through, which is normal, but. If that were to happen, I think that there may be a lot of issues. We're not current there yet, so we'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So yeah, those are the 3 buckets.
Okay.
Thanks to me and the More American Jobs Alliance. No, I'm kidding. But if we want to let's talk about integrity measures real quick.
Yeah, please do.
And we were not going to go in the weeds on this, but I think it's really interesting. Like I said when we started, I think the third-party fund administrator I heard a presentation on EB-5, and I really enjoyed it because they said when the government went to the industry and said, what would have prevented maybe a lot of these frauds? And they're like, just a third-party fund administrator, just some transparency in the program.
Right.
And maybe in the lesser end, audited financials. So the new rule is in the absence of audited financial statements, you will have to have a third-party fund administrator, which I think you're going to see the fund administration option instead of the audited financial because it just markets better abroad.
Have you seen that fund administration process yet, or
Yeah.
you have?
Yeah.
Like who? Give me an example of who would be a third-party fund administrator.
So there's a lot of good ones out there, but right now I'm working with a really fascinating group. It's called EB-5 Proxy.
Okay.
Sam Newbold and Connor Irish, and they use blockchain because this is way above my pay grade. But I'm gonna take a stab at it. This is going to be horrible. So they use blockchain to provide, combined with the fund administration platform, to provide real-time updating of NCE funds being injected to the JCE, uploading construction cost, draw request from the project.
Really?
And so you can log on as an investor in China or wherever you are in the world and see real-time progress. It also happens to have, it has an algorithm, if I said it right?
Algorithm.
Yeah, we're really getting outside my scope here.
Yeah.
And what it does is it converts those proceeds or the cost, into real-time job creation reporting. So
wow,
isn't that cool?
Yeah, and that's great for the investor.
Yeah.
Because the problem with the you hear it all the time. I hear it all the time. Where are my funds? Have they used it all? It's not really for me to answer. They have to get to hold of the developer. They have to go through the regional center. They're calling the deal side attorney saying what's going on. But really, this kind of eliminates all of that.
Yeah. No, it's super cool. Algorithm. I'm gonna say that again.
Can you spell it?
No. But there's a lot of good options out there. But I think this is great for the investor. It's great for the industry. It's great for the project sponsors because it minimizes their exposure as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Is there anything else on the integrity measures you wanted to kind of note? Or
there's going to be an integrity fund. The USCIS is going to take some of these monies from the annual RC filings and from the investor filings and create an integrity fund. And part of that will result in more periodic site visits.
Okay.
We were talking about what would be my dream job, and I'm like, I would love to be a USCIS site, visit sites. And I don't want to carry a gun, but a baton and a badge, visiting sites would just be.
We need to talk to you about your dream jobs. We need to talk off air about that.
We'll talk about that later.
Okay, we're gonna make you shoot a little bit higher. Well, let's talk a little bit. I'll talk a little bit about just EB-5. Yeah. Who are the players, and who does it benefit? Why do we even do EB-5?
Yeah.
What's the purpose? Reality EB-5 was created in 1990, I believe, really just as a job creation mechanism because of unemployment issues in the U.S. And so really EB-5 was created to benefit what I like to say is three main players. There's a lot of tertiary players like the regional centers and the economists and the attorneys, me and you, that we've all benefited. But really it was done to benefit the U.S. as a whole, the government, in helping get rid of unemployment or assisting getting rid of unemployment. That's the basis of it. Is really just high unemployment areas and how can we get more people more jobs. It was there for the developer to bring to increase development, bring foreign funds into the U.S., whether it be a little bit cheaper or more creative, whether it be through debt or equity. So if you're a developer, this really gave help to you as far as being able to bring funds into the U.S. And then the third party that it really ultimately benefits is the investor.
Sure.
And our goals, obviously, and even Shae's goal, while he represents the developer, our ultimate goal is to make sure that investor gets their green card. And while we can't control how much money they're making off of a deal, we can't control the terms of the deal or when they're going to get paid, because that's truly an investment, 100% at-risk investment, just like if Shae and I invested in a deal together. The investor is really the main piece of all of this because they're the ones putting the most at risk. They're the ones that are leaving their home countries. They're the ones that are going to a new place and trusting people like myself and Shae and the regional center and the U.S. government in this process. So the one thing that we always do is the number one focus is what gets that investor their green card.
Yep.
And while we can't control processing times, we can't control how fast immigration works. There have been measures that have been taken, lawsuits in the past, that have actually helped by a lot of good folks out there that are representing investors or developers, because the timelines have gotten too long. That's really the three main players: the U.S. government, or the U.S. as a whole, the developer, and the investor. That's why we do EB-5.
And one thing I would just add from a from a project centric perspective, if you're let's say it's a real estate development deal. If I'm a real estate developer and I bring all this capital and I take care and I do the right thing, and I try to do the right thing, and these investors get green cards, you have high net worth individuals. Who are they going to invest in for the next project?
That's right.
Non EB-5.
That's right.
So you kind of create your own natural private equity fund.
And we've seen it happen. We've had clients that this has actually worked out for really well, where they're getting more investments and they're doing more projects, creating more jobs, and that's outside of the EB-5 realm, which kind of makes you feel good, because it really just goes full circle. And even going further beyond that, I mean, these individuals or families that come to the U.S., they need every service.
That's right.
They need accountants, they need lawyers, they need realtors, they need all of that. And so while we're not, any of those but lawyers, we try to help our clients get connected with all of them.
Right.
I've introduced clients to CPAs. I'm sure you've done the same thing. Different funds or different places to park money, because most investors that are coming here to the U.S., and I can't speak to all of them, but most of them, they're not giving all of their life savings away. They have additional funds that they need to do things with. And so I think the best part of EB-5 for me is watching that family actually get to the U.S. in that first email that they send, and they say, hey, I've entered here. And I think while you can't read into the excitement of an email, you can feel the excitement of that email. And that makes you feel really good. I think that's why I do it. Why do you do it?
Yeah, no, I think it's so cheesy to say win-win-win, but God, it really is, right? It really provides an alternative affordable financing option for developers and other project sponsors. It really brings, despite what your politics are, it really brings really good people to the U.S. that need services that really will add to our society. It's a value add to our society. I have one. It's actually his nephews that are coming over. He already is a citizen here, but he's bringing his nephews over from Africa, and he's an orthodontist, and he's using the injection of EB-5 capital to create additional dental clinics, or I should say, it's really a dental service organization.
Sure.
A DSO. But how is he serving the needs of our society? He's opening up inner city clinics, or I should say dental practices, that offer orthodontics for a much more affordable price to kids that would never have the chance to get this. And so you hear about these types of stories, and that is a win-win.
And it's fortunate that you're saying that, because what we actually hear about are the stories that don't work.
Right.
We have a bunch of success stories. We have another developer you've done work for, and I've done work for the investors that built out their project, probably did it ahead of time, multifamily, and is redeploying funds. And you don't get to hear about that, where you're actually doing what you said, doing it in the right amount of time, and the investors are getting here on their green card, and they're making the investors money. And now they're going on to new projects because the investors have told their friends. And these are not, 300 investor projects. These are 5, 10, 15 investor projects, which don't get talked about enough. We always hear about these large projects in Manhattan, or large projects in downtown Dallas or San Francisco or wherever it may be, but nobody talks about that dental clinic that's being built,
right,
or the retirement facility that's being built down the street, and that may only bring in 8 or 10 investors. And so we like to call ourselves, we can do the bigger projects. We love the smaller projects.
We do, yeah.
I think we've specialized in that. We've done a really good job. I think just talking to each other, really getting each other's insights. And I don't know that you see that with deal side and immigration attorneys a lot.
Yeah, hey, I love big deals too, but I would call them non-institutional deals because
Right.
they're big for my sponsors too, right? If I build that $12 million La Quinta, that's a life changer.
That's right.
And that's a lot of stress on the line. And so, no, I mean, I think that, EB-5, it gets a bad rap sometimes.
It does.
And because I have as many deals on my desk historically, because at the end of the day, I do a lot of traditional real estate finance deals.
Sure.
I see as many dead deals there as I do with EB-5, if not even more, because maybe the EB-5 investors are more educated and more hypersensitive to finding good deals and clean deals,
Right.
conservative deals. I think maybe I have more dead deals, and and just because a deal on the traditional finance side, but just because a deal dies, doesn't mean there's fraud.
That's right. It can happen.
Happens every day.
It happens every day. Like I said, this is EB-5 is a traditional real estate, most of the time real estate deal with an immigration benefit if designed correctly and used properly. That's what I tell clients. Last thing is we want to tell you guys what to expect as we move forward. We're going to do multiple episodes. We're going to have a lot of different guests. We're going to be asking questions. We're going to tell you guys the truth, and we're going to keep you updated on all the EB-5 work that is going on. We also want to hear from you. If you guys see this link up and you guys see it on YouTube or LinkedIn or wherever you see it, we want to know what questions you have because we'll address them. We'll add our information, phone numbers, and emails at the bottom of the podcast, so you have all of our information. But we do want to hear from you. But Shae, tell the listeners about some of the plans that we have of the type of guests and the folks that we're planning on bringing in.
Yeah, and so I also think we should broadcast from like Cayman and Las Vegas. I would tell my wife that we need to be on site at these.
I think back here on this
Oh,
map,
there we go.
we need to start putting pins on everywhere we want to travel to. And I think what we'll do this next episode, we'll make sure that we have pins available, and you and I will start putting pins on everywhere we've done EB-5.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, and then everywhere we're going to broadcast, we'll have to tell our wives it's part of the podcast. It was required.
Is there like EB-5 interest in the south of Spain?
Let's take a trip.
Okay,
We'll figure it
let's
out.
figure it out.
Yeah.
New markets.
New markets, absolutely.
No, I'm excited. And to Rakesh's point, I think we want our listeners to have feedback on what type of guests you want as well.
Yeah.
What do you want to hear about? And if future podcast, we're going to deliver. We're going to try to keep it tranched, essentially no more than maybe 20 minutes. We don't want to ramble on for an hour and a half. We want to get the information that you need so you can make a decision, whether it's an investment decision or a real estate or a project finance decision.
Yeah. We plan on having regional centers on. We plan on having investors that have gotten their green card through the process, developers that have actually used the process, legislative folks that have helped create law. So we're planning on having a lot of different folks, and we'll just stay tuned. We'll get you informed on what's going on, and we look forward to our next podcast in a couple of weeks. Thank you, Shae, for joining us.
Thank you all. Thanks,
it's the EB-5 Fix. We'll see you on the next episode. Thank you.